Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this edition of Benchmark, Ramesh Shanmuganathan, Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer of John Keells Holdings, joins us on the program today as we focus on one of Sri Lanka's success stories, the IT industry. The LMD Nielsen Business Confidence Index shed 11 basis points in March. Nielsen's Managing Director Sharang Pant analyzes the reasons for the slump in business confidence. And to wrap up the show, we talk to LMD's columnist Shiran Fernando about Sri Lanka's macro outlook. That's the lineup for Benchmark.
Welcome to Benchmark, the Big Picture Business Program. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. We've been discussing Sri Lanka's IT industry, and we are joined on the program today by Ramesh Shanmuganathan, who will give us his perspective on vital issues that are facing the industry. Ramesh is Executive Vice President and Group Chief Information Officer of John Keells Holdings. He's also the CEO of John Keells IT. Welcome, Ramesh, to Benchmark. Good to have you.
Thanks. Nice to be back again.
If you look at the IT industry now, how has it progressed over the years?
I think it's progressed well over the years, but obviously things have not stopped for the rest of the world. So I think if you look at from overall perspective, even if you look at the World Economic Forum competitive index, Sri Lanka has slipped from 70 to 85 this year. It also reflects to an extent on IT as well, because obviously the competitive index depends a lot on the technology adoption of the country as well. So whilst we've done a lot from an industry point of view, in terms of even raising exports close to about $1 billion and targeting about $5 billion by 2022, I feel we are lagging behind because countries like Bangladesh, Philippines, Vietnam have taken over, and Singapore is still in number 3. And probably about 2-3 decades back, we were comparative to Singapore. So we are continually losing our posture from a regional context, though we might think from within Sri Lanka we are doing good. Penetration is improving, things are improving, but the countries around us are probably growing at a faster pace. Hence, that our competitiveness position, I think we're losing out.
You know, Sri Lanka is ranked 11th in AT Kearney's Global Services Location Index because we have apparently low labor costs and availability of labor. How do you think the Sri Lankan IT industry is actually performing in terms of the global market? Look, we are looking at taking our services outside, so but are we more Sri Lankanized here, or are we ready to go?
There are few companies who have been successful in doing that. I think a couple of the ingredients that I would think is cost factor is one, but what is the ability to create value and move up the value chain, because otherwise if you are just looking at cost arbitrage, our leverage factor is 1-to-1 in the services industry. So when you go into productization, value creation, creating IPs, your leverage is 1-to-N, depending on what kind of margins you could get and also how competitive you are compared to solutions out there. So the bigger challenge, I think, even from Classcom point of view and even the IT industry point of view, what we are trying to achieve is to see whether the companies, even through with startups, ecosystems, everything, to be able to create IPs and to create entrepreneurial abilities to drive this economic to vibrancy. But today we are contributing maybe 1 billion out of the 250 billion economy, which is insignificant from an IT footprint point of view.
So Ramesh, what are the main challenges faced by the IT industry?
So broadly, I would think talent shortage is one, right? Because today you would see technologies are rapidly kind of moving at a pace that industry is finding it tough to keep up to pace with, right? So when you have innovation cycle which are becoming shorter, and you got to keep up to it as an industry, as a nation, obviously then we also need to have a lot of things falling in place, including curriculum, including talent development, including vocational training, and also including our ability to attract the right talent and retain them in the country and in the organization. So that is becoming a huge challenge today, because the demand for that skill is growing at an exponential pace with digitalization and people trying to leverage and probably look at their organization getting modernized, their countries getting modernized and getting competitive. So one of the challenges that I see is compared to India, who are able to bring the Indians who migrated back. We are finding it very tough to do so, and for a lot of factors, in terms of maybe tax holidays, in terms of tax rebates on the payee side of things, and also even the young talent who are coming out of universities, they gain a few years of experience and then look for greener pastures. And we are having a huge brain drain from an IT industry point of view, which is going to be a challenge given what we want to achieve for the country.
Now, according to the Department of Census and Statistics, the IT literacy rate in Sri Lanka is mostly concentrated in the western area and also just the main urban cities. Now, that does pose a problem because we
Yes.
do have others out there. How do we rope all these people in?
So I think again we have a couple of probably perceptions, right? In terms, a lot of the people after they graduate from school feel that they have to gravitate towards Western province or where the economic hubs are to get employment. But today, I think the only platform which could kind of help them do what they can from where they are is obviously IT and digital, right? So I know we got high penetration of mobiles and technology in terms of coverage, but internet usage still remains about 6 million or 25% of the population. So I think that is where we need to also see how do you make this affordable, so that people can be contributing a platform, because that's where the world is today. Today it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you have connection to internet, you can contribute to the economy and you can contribute to an organization. I think we need to look at probably road infrastructure. I always said is important, but it's important to have a IT digital infrastructure, because that is the only which going to connect you to the world, to the suppliers, to the customers, and for us to be able to grow our services economy. Right.
What is the impact that you expect from government initiatives that have been formed to support the industry?
It's been good, but I feel, as I said, like the Indian economy, we have to stop depending on the government and also start as a private sector, moving on and doing our own things as well. But from a government sector point of view, obviously the policies have to be consistent. I know about a couple of years back, there was a concession on pay for professionals to retain professionals. Now that kind of went away. So these kind of inconsistencies also probably makes it difficult for us to retain talent and attract them. And even people who have migrated, when they want to come back, they come back for a reason. Obviously they have some expectations in terms of an income, and it becomes tough to sustain that kind of a stuff if you don't have a macroeconomic condition which is stable.
The EDB recently launched its Island of Ingenuity branding for the IT BPM sector, also pledging 300 million rupees for the IT industry this year. There's also other sort of initiatives in the budget which have been pledged. How realistic, or how do you feel that these will actually impact the industry, and how realistic are all these?
So the Island of Ingenuity branding is good. I feel ultimately there is talent and the potential. The problem that we've been faced with is how do you harness this at scale and repeat this success across a multitude of organizations and a handful of organizations, right? So today you can see there are success stories of IT organizations are very limited, and Virtues are probably topping the list. But can we replicate Virtues' success at scale in Sri Lanka? I think that's where our success would lie, right? So today, if you look at, there are a lot of businesses in India who have crossed that threshold of 10 billion exports and stuff. So that is where we also need to get to. So all of these are pretty good because it gives people a kind of sense of gravitation towards IT, and it's a good field to be, and to attract talent, retain them. But obviously the rest of it also has to fall in place, right? Branding, the EDB pledge, what SLUSCOM is doing or ICT is doing is good. But what I'm saying is that alone won't suffice. We need a lot more things to fall in place, especially I'm just saying, if you are going to go after 1,000 startups, we need to also have the venture capital mindset. The banks to be kind of much more open to lending rather than just looking at lending against a collateral. Right? So today also you have peer-to-peer lending taking off. in a big scale. So your lenders could even come from overseas. So that is what we need to be, even from a policy point of view. Even central bank needs to be open to, right? Peer-to-peer lending. How do you facilitate that? Even international payments like PayPal. How do you open the borders of Sri Lanka beyond the physical structures from a digital point of view? So because obviously there is going to be challenges, because we may not be competitive, but if we don't allow that competition, we won't get sharper either. We are going to be lethargic, we are going to be complacent, we are going to be maintaining status quo, because there is no push to change, because people are comfortable growing the organically they are, and they probably lose sight of what's happening in the global context.
So much more to discuss after the break, Ramesh. Please stay there. We will continue our discussion with Ramesh Shanmuganathan. Time for a break now, and do stay with us, because we will return when he discusses the role that IT can play in developing other industries as well, among other issues. Stay with us.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
$8,500 done. 1,500 to go. Hoorah!
What on earth are you doing?
I'm making money.
You're crazy.
Crazy for money. 10,000 steps done. Who the man? I do it every single day. Show me the money.
So you run 10,000 steps every day, huh? You must be fit.
Some days I do 20,000. Hoorah!
So thank you for staying with Benchmark. We now return to our discussion with Ramesh Shanmuganathan, who's Executive Vice President and Group CIO of John Keells Holdings, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of John Keells IT. Ramesh, Slascom, for instance, plans to have 1,000 startups by 2022. We like the idea, but how can entrepreneurship, from what you told us just before the break about banks not being open to lending, there are lots of barriers for startups. How can entrepreneurship be encouraged and promoted, in your opinion?
So entrepreneurship, I feel, is difficult to incubate unless you have the conditions which are kind of encouraging it also. So today, the 1,000 startup dream of Slascom obviously is a challenge, but I think they have made positive steps towards it. So even if you look at what John Keells is doing, is similarly adding to that ecosystem of startups. But the challenge that I see is everyone will have an idea, but how big is that idea and how relevant is that idea to address a pain area which is broad enough to make a business sense and to grow. Right? So the bigger challenge I feel is a lot of the people might have a good idea, but they may not have a bankable proposal. So, do you need to have the business mindset and the knowledge to make it a viable proposal, which you can even convert in a bankable document to go to a bank and discuss it. So those are the skill sets probably which are missing from a startup ecosystem point of view. But a lot of people are helping, like even Slashcom too, like what John Kiss is doing, all the startup programs are trying to help the entrepreneurs get into a proposition of being able to run a company from a bootstrap position to getting into a VC to maybe even I hope that a couple of them will end up into the top ranks. But the bigger challenge that I see is from the education system itself, right. A lot of people when they graduate want to work for someone, right. So it's I would rather be employed than be an entrepreneur. So it has a stigma probably from a cultural context as well, from a Sri Lankan point of view, which I feel needs to get addressed. I see more and more people getting into the entrepreneurial mindset, but it is because they believe in something, they probably burn out their own savings or friends, families funding it. So that's the kind of startup that we are seeing more than a venture capital led startup, which also brings in those criterias and evaluation things, so that people sharpen the axe, because they know this is what they are looking for to invest in a company. So then your benchmarks gets tighter, and it gets relevant from a global context. So what we are doing with John Kiss X is also similar to that. So we are also helping from John Kiss's corporate structures point of view to the startup. We are giving legal expertise, corporate finance, IT, so that they also can quickly sharpen the axe and refine the proposal faster and get to becoming a company which is of relevance faster than take a longer period of gestation.
Are there strengths that IT companies can actually focus on to further develop and market their products?
Yeah, definitely, because I think one of the handicaps that we've been having is in terms of a brand, because most of the companies may not have the reach to market their company, establish a brand and the services. So that's where I feel Slashcom, EDB have done a lot over the last 2 decades in arranging these kind of programs where companies are taken overseas, given introductions, they work through the chambers, different bodies in country. So obviously that's very a slow way to enter market. That's where, as opposed to taking those markets to those products to markets, is easier to get into a platform economy and see whether you have a wider opportunity to address a requirement from a digital context. I think that's the bigger growth opportunity that I see for Sri Lanka, because we have the talents and we need to think beyond in terms of where our resourcing and talent could come from and where our customers could come from. I think because I think a classic example is if you look at Uber's, Airbnb's of the world, started from San Francisco and grown all over the world. And obviously, then people start funding it because they see the potential. And I don't think Sri Lanka will be any different.
But do we have that mindset to disrupt?
Right now, I don't think so. It's with a handful of companies and people, because we are very comfortable with what we have and we don't foresee or face significant challenges to change.
Ramesh, we always think of the IT industry as this separate industry, and then there's all these other industries all put into compartments. But what most people, or what lots of us don't realize, is that IT can play a very integral role in developing all these other industries. How do we bring all this together?
So my take right along has been IT is a digital nervous system of the country and an organization. You can't separate the two. It's like it will be foolhardy to think any company will survive without IT in its core or as a core foundation, because ultimately if you don't have it, you're going to get isolated and you're going to probably kind of get lost in the system. So the bigger challenge for organizations is to understand that earlier on in the life cycle and see how we could collaborate, because today most of the organizations have this mentality of backward integration, forward integration, own the entire value chain. So from a platform economic point of view, you don't have to, right? If you are good in manufacturing, stick to that. and plug into the platform economy, find the supply chain guy who could manage that, and maybe even a distributor model who could sell your products. So if you the common example that I always talk about is, now today I log into Amazon, order something, pay through PayPal, get it delivered through DHL. A to Z, I am detecting and I am configuring the value chain, right? So today that is the power of the platform economy. So if you're strong in a part of the value chain, just focus on that and build scale on that. And if you have the digital platform, you can plug and play and grow your business. So today, if you look at a lot of the disruptions are going to come from that context, because people try to own value chain and the value chains are getting disrupted because there are a person who can do better in a part of the value chain and can bring in efficiencies and scale.
Yeah, speaking of that, what are the latest emerging technologies that the industry can adopt?
So today, there is a lot, right? I think if you just shift focus, today we are if you look at Sri Lanka, it's a cash-based society, right? So today we are saying data is the currency, information is your asset. You don't have to build brick and mortar assets anymore. And AI, artificial intelligence, is a new user interface, because today you would rather talk to even a machine if you know you will get the relevant answer, like Google search, right? You will never, when was the last time you looked up a dictionary, or when was the last time you looked up a map, right? Because you know today, if you just Google it, you will get the right answer. So today it's about how do you integrate the data and information which is of relevance to make your life easier. So today we moved from a bartering era to a money-led era. Now we are going into a digital currency. So because it's ultimately it's a record somewhere. So blockchain, for example, in terms of hyperledger, is going to facilitate that superledger which is foolproof across the world in whatever industry that you are in, and adding data to information, to artificial intelligence, to all the other stuff, big data, to robotics, 3D printing. There are a lot of technology disruptions which are happening, but that is irrelevant if we are unable to make that impactful in terms of what we are trying to do, right? So today we are deploying, from a Sri Lankan context, point solutions. The technology from a point form saying, okay, I have this, so I am there, which is not the case, right? Because you are not sharing the value chain and how you service the customer, because ultimately today we are also going from a mass commoditization to mass personalization, which is information led, which is data led, and which is more about information I have of the person than what I have within the organization.
So briefly, as a final question, what do you foresee for the IT industry in the next year or so?
I feel there's a huge potential, but there are a lot of things that in the jigsaw puzzle that we need to fix. I don't see any massive transformation, though we have the potential, unless we get act together from the policy point of view, from the government institution point of view, as well as the private sector, working together, and people understanding that there's much more potential in IT and digital than what we are today experiencing, because we are just scratching the surface.
Thank you very much, Ramesh. Good talking to you.
Likewise.
So we've been chatting about the issues and various positives also pertaining to the IT industry with Ramesh Shanmuganathan, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer of John Keells Holdings, as well as the CEO of John Keells IT. On the other side, we have Anushan Selvaraja with more. Stay with us.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
Done. 1,500 go. Hoorah!
What on earth are you doing?
I'm making money!
You're crazy.
Crazy for money! 10,000 steps done! Who the man? I do it every single day! Show me the money.
So you run 10,000 steps every day, huh? You must be fit.
Some days I do 20,000. Hoorah!
Welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on the Business Confidence Index. Joining me is the Managing Director of Nielsen, Sharang Pant. Welcome back to the show, Sharang. Now, in the aftermath of the local government elections, the BCI tumbled to by about around 11 points. Now, what can we glean from this?
So after about 4 months of continuous increase, the BCI came down in the month of March to 117 from its previous number of 128. Now the reasons behind it are not really in terms of the economy, but more in terms of the political uncertainty or the ethnic classic, as you mentioned. If we look at the inflation in fact is coming down. If you look at the other economic factors, the IMF has also said things are moving in the right direction. So it's more of the changes that are happening on the political side which are driving the business confidence. Even in terms of consumer confidence, consumers are still a bit wary of loosening their purse because they are waiting for the inflation to ease down further before the festival period. And as a result, we see the CCI, or the consumer confidence, also remaining about the same level at 58 compared to the previous month.
What are the most pressing issues, first on the business side and then on the national side as well as per the business community?
So what business leaders are saying is taxes still remain their top concerns, taxes on their own businesses, plus the new taxes that will start impacting the consumers from the month of April. Those remain at the top. About 2 in 3 also talk about the political situation in the country. And then there are other things like inflation and interest rate, which the businesses talk about. When it comes to the national issues, it's the political situation which comes up at the top, followed by the situation of the economy which comes up at number 2.
So how do they view our economic, business and investment prospects going forward?
So sentiments around economy or business prospects have come down. If you talk about the economy, about 15% of the respondents say that the economy might improve in the next 12 months. This number was higher in the previous few months. If you talk about the business prospects, both short-term and long-term, just about 1 in 5 say that they look positive in the 12 months or the 3 months coming up front. This number was higher at 29% in the previous month.
What would be your projections then for the BCI, Shara?
It needs to be seen how the political scenario pans out in the next few days. If things go well, if there is stability and policies move towards the positive, the business sentiments can move up, primarily because the macro indicators are already moving in the positive. Take the GDP growth, which agriculture did perform very well in the fourth quarter of 2017, or the inflation, which is easing in the recent times. If the political situation goes hand in hand with the macroeconomic indicators, then we might see the index moving up in the next couple of months.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sharang.
Thanks.
That was the Managing Director of Nielsen, Sharang Pant. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
Welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anshin Selvaraj. Now for a closer look at the latest on the economy. Joining me is economist and LMD columnist Shiran Fernando. Welcome back to the show, Shiran. Now, Shiran, our exports have been doing quite well in the recent past. What are the sensitivities behind this?
So after a few years, I think, of export numbers coming off, 2016 we saw a significant push up, and I think it's reflective of the demand that's happening globally to pick up in terms of world GDP and what that means in terms of world trade, and specifically to our 2 main markets, which is the US and the European Union. So both markets, I think, have now seen a rebound in terms of economic activity, and that's reflected as well. And I think for example, for tea, I think some of the markets such as the Middle East and the Russian markets have done relatively better to what it has been doing in the last few years. So a mixture of those, and of course I think GSP plus overall. So it's not really a diversification of our exports or new exports that have really driven it, but these macro global trends that have happened which have benefited us.
What have been the main drivers then for our export sector?
So tea exports, for example, has risen to I think about 1.5 billion last year, so that was a healthy pickup, and that's quite commendable given that because of the drought, production was quite low. But what helped it was the price increases that were seen, reflective of the lack of supply, but also of the markets doing much better and being able to fetch high prices. Apparel exports, textile exports did much better, but that was also in the second half of last year. So if you look at how the first half was performing relative to 2016, it was quite weak, but in the second half I think there was in excess of 10% growth, which carried, I think, exports towards the end. You also did see petroleum exports going up. I think we're not necessarily known as a petroleum or a full sort of maybe an exporter, but I think volumes for example, bunkering and things like that are picking up, and the rise from that is also due to oil prices going up. So even though oil prices going up is negative for our fuel imports that we get for electricity and for vehicles and whatnot, we're also benefiting from that rise because of bunkering and those activities. So overall, I think those have really driven the export earnings last year.
Shiran, present-day politics are putting a damper on things across the board. Now, what should the business sector be focusing on to move forward?
So that's an interesting point, but I think what businesses should focus on, I know it does have a damper, but on the macro realities of it, I think relative to a few years ago, some of the numbers are doing much better, but sentiment can't afford to go lackluster because growth is not also doing too well as well. So last year it was about 3.1%. The release numbers showed the full year numbers. So if sentiment does go really negative and you don't see investment by companies, then activity will then just slow down. So I think maybe the sentiment should not react negatively to it, but also plan based on the election cycles that are coming, what that will mean in terms of consumption. Will there be more moves to increase disposable income of consumers? Will there be price cuts? What are the results of it? And also, I think starting from this month as well, you're seeing the new Indian Revenue Act also. So I think businesses have to be ready for that, what that means in terms of higher taxes, in terms of some of the tax rates that you get, and the other things very specific to their businesses. So there is, I think, a lot for businesses to digest within it, but fundamentally to understand that the macro is at least at a healthier position to maybe take a bit of these political noise and a bit of these political shocks, but you can't always rely on a few institutions taking the economy forward, but at least for the moment, or at least the next 3 to 6 months, we have some sort of macro stability if you look at the indicators.
Thank you very much for joining us, Shiran.
Pleasure to be here.
That was economist and LMD columnist Shiran Fernando. Thank you for watching Benchmark, and we hope to see you again next time.